Hollywood isn't a dream factory, it's a war zone where stars claw their way to the top. And when two titans lock horns, it's not about just winning, it's about survival. Take Marlon Brando vs Frank Sinatra. Brando was a method acting lunatic, while Sinatra was old school Hollywood and backed by some very dangerous friends. They despised each other from the moment they met, and when they were cast together in Guys and Dolls, it was war. Brando intentionally botched scenes to make Sinatra redo his takes. It didn't matter, the film made $13 million, a fortune at the time, but their hatred became the bigger legend.
Spang something!
Wow. Son of a bitch, I grabbed the was exactly the bush. There's all this.
The one you banged into had to be one of those?
I remember hearing about Prince and Michael Jackson always had these insane rivalries with each other where everything had to outdo the other person. If one did a tour, the other would literally find out how big the stage was going to be, and then even if they were in the middle of a tour, say, rip the whole thing up and make it bigger. And sometimes it would lead to them losing money because they'd agree to whatever they wanted because it's fucking Michael Jackson or Prince. Like, what are you going to say? But then they'd find out, oh shit, if we actually do his demands and make the stage this big, then we're cutting out like an extra 10% of the seats. We're going to lose this much money. He wants all these pyrotechnics and crazy shit and to come out of a giant flying elephant. This is going to cost a fortune. So they'd literally lose money, but they didn't care because it was about the rivalry. Ego gets a bad rap, and for good reason, but when you look at most amazing overachievers and incredible people, there's always ego involved, and it's you got to admit it's at least part of the driving force and sometimes the main talent that person actually has. You know, Ricky Gervais is a weird example, but I always think he's a good example because he's incredibly witty. There's no denying it, but if you look at all the things considered, he's more successful than arguably he should be on paper for his talent, but his ego and self-belief is so massive, and his drive, and he seems to just back himself into pulling off anything. Doesn't matter what it is, he'll go up on the Golden Globes and rip into everyone. I think he'll star in Hollywood movies. When he first was breaking out with The Office, he wasn't daunted by his new celebrity and all these famous people. He seemed to just be like, yeah, no, I should be friends with all these fucking famous people. There's no room he found himself in where he didn't feel like he belonged. That's from it seems on the outset. I'm sure he had his own anxieties about stuff, but it seemed to be that ego that drove him. And you take two people like Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger, you know, two massive egos in Hollywood during the 80s and 90s when they reigned supreme with their corny, awesome action flicks. It was those two going at each other for top billing. They always wanted to outdo each other, especially Sly Stallone, because let's face it, he was kind of always behind. Arnie was pretty much king. And it's just hilarious to think how much it bothered them and how much they wanted to be better than each other.
It's okay to have a massive ego, but I think that we've also got to respect work ethic as well, because if we look at it on face value, you wouldn't really say that Arnie and Sly are amazing actors, would you?
Not from hearing them.
Not from hearing them.
Their voices don't scream movie star.
You know, they can barely speak, especially Sylvester Stallone, you know. He had a problem at birth. The story goes that he was brought out by forceps. It was a complicated birth, and that messed up the way he spoke. You know, Arnold Schwarzenegger, if we look at his early roles, Terminator, luckily his role as the T-100 or whatever, T-800, I can't remember, was just the presence, the bulking Hulk, you know, running around, body count and all that. He barely spoke a word, you know what I mean? And sometimes you can have all the talent in the world, but you need a work ethic. I mean, look at Sylvester Stallone in Rocky. He wrote it, he had no money, he had to sell his dog, and he got where he was from nothing with the work ethics. They're not the most talented people, and yes, they have egos, but they also have incredible drives, both of them. You have to say that.
100%, and I wasn't at all trying to imply like it was only ego. They are crazy workaholics, the two of them. Arnold Schwarzenegger, you know, look at his list of accomplishments just outside of acting. Mr. Olympia for like a bunch of times, I don't know how many. There's that awesome documentary Pump where you see him going up against Lou Ferrigno, the new challenger at the time. And not only is Arnold Schwarzenegger putting in all that work in the gym, but he also is playing mind games with Lou Ferrigno before they're going out to perform. You know, he shows up while he's having lunch with his dad. He's friendly, but there's an air of dominance around the way he does it. You know, he shows up, he knows they don't like each other, they're competing. He's already got the thing, and he's probably going to get it again that Lou Ferrigno's grasping for, that he really wants. He knows he wants to just relax, be around his people, be with his dad, try and calm his nerves before he's supposed to go out and perform. But he's showing up and sitting down and passive aggressively just fucking letting him know, no, you're the bitch, don't forget that. Don't delude yourself, think you're going to beat me today, and he ends up not beating him. You know, he became the fucking governor of California. You know, he's done all these incredible things. So there's no denying, like, insane work ethic. But it's that ego as well, and it's that wanting to be the best. And it's hilarious, like, the lengths they went to. Like, even things like the kill count in their movies. They would keep track of each other's kill count, especially Sly Stallone. If he killed 100 people in the last movie, he's like, I need to kill 101 people in the next movie. One of the funniest things that happened out of it was, obviously, they're aware of each other and aware of each other behind the scenes, trying to one-up each other. So Arnold Schwarzenegger, again, proving that he's like the master of the psychological game. He got a script in front of him for the not-so-classic Stop or My Mum Will Shoot. A pile of shit. Now, I actually kind of don't mind it. I remember seeing it years ago when I was a kid and I was in Ireland, I think, staying at my nan's house, and they had like 2 channels and it was randomly on. It was passable for 10-year-old me at the time. I'm sure it's terrible if I tried to watch it now. But, I'm not above a dumb movie. But Schwarzenegger saw the script and he was like, well, this is dog shit. But he actually leaked rumours, either through his agent or however, that he was really interested in the film and he wanted it. Sly Stallone picked up on the rumours, and just like Arnold Schwarzenegger was plotting, he rung up the studio and was like, give me the part. Sly Stallone got the role and didn't realise until halfway through production he'd obviously been done over and the film was a complete pile of shit. I don't know if he even read the script before saying yes to it, because he was just so desperate to get one over on Arnie.
Fucking hell. So Arnold was literally like doing 3D chess like 4 or 5 moves ahead.
Oh mate, he I love Sly Stallone, but there's no denying Arnold Schwarzenegger 100% came out on top in pretty much every way.
Yeah, that body count thing, I didn't actually know that before you revealed it, and now thinking about it in hindsight, it makes perfect sense, because if I look back at Rambo, he'll be like running around with his arrows that explode and stuff, and he'll shoot a car, but the car will be next to like some oil cans, and the oil cans will explode and take out 6 people instead of the one.
Yeah, you gotta love action film physics, where just anything is flammable and combustible. Everything can blow up at the slightest touch.
Like a car will be driving along and a rock will hit it and it will just go I remember watching that parody of Rambo. Is it Hot Shots?
Hot Shots. And Hot Shots Part Deuce was the actual Rambo parody.
Yes. And in it, I was like, what's this about? Like, Charlie Sheen's going around. Yeah, it was funny. It kind of reminds me of, like, Aeroplane, Naked Gun. And I guess that's what they were going for. But there's a running gag in it when every person dies. There'll be, like, a little counter in the corner. And it'll be, like, 10, 11. And I was like, what are they doing this for? And I guess it's because of that. If we go back to the start of their careers, obviously Conan the Barbarian, Terminator, if you watch back those films now, I never got a sense of the rivalry that would become. Do you know what I mean? I didn't see them as 2 action titans from those first films.
Well, we didn't live through that era, so yeah. I guess you couldn't. And even then, I don't know how, it's not like you'd have Messi and Ronaldo fanboy wars going on between the two. Maybe if the internet had existed back then, I'm sure there was film fans sitting around in a video store back in the 80s arguing about who was better. Maybe, I'm sure that happened, but if you're a fan of action films, I'd imagine you'd be a fan of both. You might have one or the other, but I don't think the comparison would come too much into your head. But it's funny, you're talking about the early films, and Arnold Schwarzenegger, as much as I was saying he came out on top, he was behind Stallone in his career. He was the one he was trying to emulate, and he kind of knew, I need to go bigger and badder and crazier and more explosions, more everything. But Stallone, Rocky, the franchise, embraced how generic and formulaic it became. That became the fun of it. When's the music going to kick in? Once Rocky's had his wife, or in the later films, his wife's dead, so there's always someone around to give him the rousing, you got to get up there and win, Rock, and then the music starts and he's running about. But the early ones, the first 2, were just films.
Yeah.
They weren't popcorn films. They weren't the first one won an Oscar, I think, won the Oscar for best script. And Rambo 1 is an amazing film that deals with PTSD of returning soldiers and how they just get discarded by society. These were deep films. Arnold Schwarzenegger, he got to do some films that were pretty interesting later. You know, Maggie was like a zombie film, but it was a deep zombie film, and like Loss of Daughter and all that. But for the most part, he never got to do those sort of films. He might have had the bigger, crazier, more iconic action films. But I wonder if a part of him was ever jealous that he never got to have that part of his career. Stallone had a level of pedigree that he was never able to grasp in Hollywood.
Do you think that's a coincidence he didn't do those parts? Or do you think Schwarzenegger knew his acting limitations? Like, because as I said, Declan, I don't... Like, it's a fact, in my opinion, that his range of acting isn't great. And it's not like a Nicolas Cage, where Nicolas Cage can do that crazy action thing, but then he can do roles like Pig and stuff like that. I couldn't see Arnold Schwarzenegger doing that. I think he knows very well what roles will suit him and what he can do. I couldn't imagine Arnold Schwarzenegger in a proper grounded drama film. Like, imagine him speaking and like someone's died and he's like, oh, like I'm not gonna do the impressions.
You gotta go.
He's like, she's dead now, but yeah, I can't do it. But do you know what I'm saying? Like, do you think he'd have the acting range to pull these roles off? And do you think he knew that he wasn't the best actor, and he very carefully chose the roles? You talk about him being very logical. He is a logical guy. During the height of his popularity, he must have been offered loads of stuff, and I'm sure if we looked into it, he's turned loads of stuff down that becomes a hit. But maybe he was like, I don't think I can act well enough to pull off how good a film this is.
Well, before I answer, I'm not letting you off the Arnold Schwarzenegger impression.
Frankly, dear, I don't give a damn. That's not bad. It's not bad, but it's not great.
That's pretty good. Okay, so honestly, I think he could. Like, I really think he's that much of a psycho that he would just make himself somehow nail it. And also, like, I think he could act. Like, there's moments where in his films where, you know, Terminator, it was a reserved form of acting. It was nearly like a anti-performance because he was playing a robot, but that was fucking good acting. And any times when he's actually supposed to play a part straight, or a moment at least in a film straight, or be emotional in some way, like, he sold it for me. Like, I honestly think he could. I think he does have it in his locker.
Let's get this straight. He got Conan the Barbarian because of his physical appearance.
Oh, no doubt, yeah.
No doubt. If he looked like a normal Weasley person, like Randall from Recess, or was my height, you know, and my build, I'm not the biggest guy, as you viewers can see.
But with his head on your body.
Yeah. Do you think he would have got those roles? Yeah.
I mean, that's just... No, of course not. Of course, like, his physique is the remarkable thing about him. Well, it's one of the remarkable things about him, and it's... Visually, it's the remarkable thing about him, obviously, and that is very important in casting. But there's loads of really big people. There's loads of men with incredible physiques. That's a bit gay, but you know what I mean. But you know, where are they? Why aren't they all movie stars? It doesn't work that way. There's got to be something else, as a certain more charisma. Because I'm not being funny. Yeah. I don't love Arnold Schwarzenegger movies because he's so big. It's the thing that gets him in the door, and you know, you take it away and it wouldn't be as cool, no doubt. But Arnold Schwarzenegger, I don't know why, he's just fucking so entertaining. Like, he's so compelling. He's so fucking ridiculous and funny, but brilliant. Like, he shouldn't work, but he's fucking great.
I agree with that in the respect that if you look at his films that are supposedly weaker, that critics were panned, I would watch them, like Kindergarten Cop. What's that Christmas one where he's trying to find...
Jingle All the Way.
Yeah, Jingle All the Way. I'd watch
Turbo
that.
Doll.
Last Action Hero.
Fucking, they're just all...
They're good films.
Great.
Like, yeah, like...
Commando, go to the really corny 80s one. They're fucking...
Predator.
Brilliant.
Great film.
Like, who else has more one-liners? No one.
You've kind of already said that you believe that there's only one winner to this rivalry already. You've nailed your colours to the mast. I'm just trying to think of ways to argue Stallone now. in terms of actual acting and actually as a film as a whole, Rocky 1 is a better film as a whole than anything Arnold Schwarzenegger's ever done.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I already said I feel like he has a level of credibility from his Oscar win and a lot of the films he made that Arnold Schwarzenegger never will have. He never got. And Rocky, it's one of those things where technically, I have to say Rocky is, technically sort of a better film than the majority of Schwarzenegger's films, but I'd still turn around and be like, what, Terminator 2? Like, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That might be an action film, but why does that negate it from being one of the greatest films of all time? Like, it just is. Would you rewatch Rocky more than some of Schwarzenegger's films? I mean, to be fair, more than a lot of Stallone's other films.
I do. I have rewatched Rocky a few and it's funny, this is a coincidence, but I was actually close to rewatching the other day because I had a bad day at work, and it's just kind of like one of the films that just make me feel happy. Like, I like the fact that, you know, he was a bum, he had no money, and he wrote this and then won an Oscar for it. Even the trainer, Mickey, is an iconic character in itself. Like, get up, Rock! It has that romance element where he's trying to win her over and she wants nothing to do with it. And, you know, at the end, iconic, Adrian! Like, so yeah, I would rewatch Rocky again, but at the same time, I must have rewatched Terminator 1 and 2 hundreds and hundreds of times. Even watching Terminator 2 now, Declan, some of that special effects, I'm like, how the fuck did they do this? Do you know what I mean? Like, we didn't really see them on screen together. It's not like an Al Pacino, De Niro Heat moment in their career, but later on they did get together on The Expendables. Great action film with a great ensemble cast. That spawned the franchise that has gone on and on and on and still continues to go on. I will tell the truth, Declan, I've only actually seen Expendable ones, and it's an alright film.
But I love the idea of it. Still get action films, but that kind of dominating era of muscle-bound action stars and action movies being the biggest cinema fillers through the 80s and 90s was gone. And as a result, you know, the cast of names and faces you're going to recognise and who are big players in Hollywood is going to change. You know, it's a lot less abs and six packs and big biceps and stuff. You know, fucking stars started looking a bit more like Brad Pitt, and, you know, they should be filming Ralph Lauren commercials rather than starring in the biggest Hollywood movies. So you just like that whole, if you wanted to make this film even today without having the gimmick of going back and getting all the old action stars, you couldn't do it, because who would you get? So it's brilliant that he went back and he was like, I'm going to sort out like a retirement package for all the fucking action stars from the 80s and 90s that can't get work no more. He got Arnold Schwarzenegger on board, and apparently they're great friends now. You know, Stallone's talked about it. They spent 20 years trying to kill each other, and now they're best friends. Go figure. It's one of the few bitter rivalries that in Hollywood that ended up actually having the Hollywood ending.
Yeah,
nice little bow on that.
The whole idea of our business is illusion, and they're getting away from that now, putting electric squibs in livers and blowing them up in slow motion and having blood all over everything. I mean, it's not that there's more violence in pictures today. It's that it's done with such bad taste that people turn their stomachs, not their emotional insides.
So John Wayne was undeniably the most iconic star of the most iconic genre of the most iconic period for one of the biggest genres in filmmaking history, especially Hollywood history, the Western. You know, the 40s and the 50s and the 60s. He was the epitome of what Westerns were like in that day, where it was that romanticized idea of the cowboy, romanticized idea of the West, you know, a simplified philosophy of what's right and what's good and what's a man and what's a woman and what's moral and what's not. So it's not surprising that when Clint Eastwood started showing up with his bizarre, ultra-violent for the times Westerns coming out of Europe with these Romanian gypsies pretending to be Mexicans and no one speaking the same language on set, and the production values were all over the place, terrible in comparison with the Hollywood machine, the stuff they were churning out. And it had the anti-hero, which was basically a big fuck you to that golden era of Westerns that Wayne was a part of. It wasn't black and white about good versus evil and, you know, the noble man who rises to the occasion and comes out on top and everyone can cheer and walk out of the cinema and whatever the fuck. It was this blurred lines, you know, this guy who's kind of a prick but not completely a prick, and everyone seems to love him for some reason. So it kind of makes sense that John Wayne would have fucking hated these movies, and as a result, by proxy, he hated Clint Eastwood.
I try and look at this rivalry from the perspective of John Wayne. He was the undisputed GOAT of Westerns. And obviously, he has a legacy. He still has a huge legacy in Westerns. Let's not get that twisted. John Wayne was a king. This new guy's come along. The jealousy's there, Declan. The jealousy was 100% there. He's looking at it going, is this guy gonna tarnish my legacy, impact the legacy of all the great work I've done? You know, John Wayne, as a character, was a very conservative guy. My Westerns need to be good versus evil, black and white. The good person always has to win. And he's looking at it going, what's this guy's deal? Like, is he good? Is he bad? And like, let's tell the truth. It fucking wound him up. And it wound him up so much, Declan, that after the release of High Plains Drifter, he literally wrote Eastwood a letter just criticising it, being like, you're literally destroying everything I've done. You're messing up the Western genre. It should be about this, and I've already established it should be good versus evil. And basically, fuck you. Do you know what I mean?
Now, on one hand, like, we're assuming it wasn't coming from jealousy and stuff, and it was probably all mixed up a lot of reasons together. Just give him the benefit of the doubt that it was only 20% jealousy and 80% genuine passion. Then you got to appreciate that. I love that idea that he wasn't just a star of Westerns and then going home and just being like, well, that was a load of shit, but I'm fucking taking this big old check to the bank. Happy days. He fucking cared. Like, I love the idea that he really cared about what Westerns represented, the ideals of it. It's funny, you were saying conservative. He was a bit more than that. I'm pretty sure there was a Playboy interview where he literally said he was a white supremacist and whites are the superior race, which is hilarious. You just casually do that in a press junket back then. But anyway, I actually kind of love that. Yeah, like, I got to admit, I actually kind of appreciate that he cared that much to write him a letter. But at the same time, you want to be like, who the fuck is... Like, that's like someone... Like, I'm not a fan of... Who's that cunt, that artist who cut his ear off and he does all the weird faces? I'm not a fan of that. I don't really see why that's a great thing. It looks just like a mess and not that hard to do.
I'm pretty sure he had like schizophrenia and was like hearing bare voices, so it's like translates his garbled crap, and also cutting off his ear because he was hearing the voices, so he was like, I don't want to hear this anymore.
Wasn't the ear... I thought the ear thing was because he gave it to some woman he was in love with.
He was also mad, yeah.
Which is like, how fucking freaked
Imagine
out was she? I don't know much about art, obviously, the fact that I'm slagging him off, but we visited Rome recently with a couple of our friends, went to the Vatican, and I was fucking, blown away. You look at a beautiful Renaissance period piece of art and there's so much detail, and I'm like, how the fuck did someone do that? Like, it's incredible. I love that. But I don't understand why Picasso's supposedly good for jumbling up the face and looks like someone splattered spaghetti on it and then tried to make a face out of it. But I can't say that's not art or that's against the rules. You're not supposed to do that. It's supposed to be like this. Draw a normal face in proportion. What are you doing? David Lynch, you can't go fucking completely nuts and make a razor head with no plot and crying demon baby in the corner for no reason and what the fuck's going on and why is his hair all quiffed up like that? That's not how it works. So who the fuck is he? I mean, he's John Wayne, so
he's John Wayne.
If there's anyone, it's him, I guess. But who the fuck is he still to try and tell someone this is what the genre is supposed to be?
But Eastwood hit back at Wayne many years later in his autobiography. Because obviously Eastwood had a very impressive career, so but he's going to bring up that rivalry for a bit of the book because it will sell. But he basically said what he was trying to do in his Westerns. Life isn't as simple as everyone's good and everyone's bad, which is true. People are manipulative, people have agendas, and his characters often did, Declan. His Westerns were an evolution of what Wayne had already done. Wayne had put a great foundation, but things move on. Everything moves on in life and film moves on, and Wayne just couldn't grasp that things evolve and it's not as simple as black and white. And to be fair, Declan, I've got to agree with Eastwood on this one. Yeah,
John Wayne was, he saw it how he saw it, and he was like that to his dying day. He actually started one of the only ever pro-war Vietnam films.
Really?
Yeah, like he started one very early in the war. But one thing you got to give John Wayne, I guess, to defend his way of looking at it, like there's always gatekeeping when things change. When sound first became possible in film, everyone was like, it's going to ruin film. All these most famous actors suddenly had dumb sounding voices, so all their careers died overnight. So there's always that thing of gatekeeping. But when you look at it, the film industry, once John Wayne started, had been around 30 years? It hadn't really evolved. It hadn't even completely formed all the genres that could evolve. It probably was understandable that you look at it like, no, this is what it is. This is what it's always been. And before that, it was nothing, which was only like 20, 30 years ago. So don't go changing it.
They both had legendary collaborations with directors. Wayne with John Ford, Clint Eastwood with Sergio Leone. Unfortunately, as a biased point of view, I give it to Clint Eastwood simply because I knew who John Wayne was. Every so often, The Searchers would be on Channel 5 and I'd caught that. But Sergio Leone and Clint Eastwood are the two people that made me fall in love with Westerns. So from a biased point of view, I give it to Eastwood.
Do you know what? I think there's no clear winner because it's kind of like when you're like Mike Tyson versus Muhammad Ali. I know they overlapped a little bit, but really it's different eras. And that's kind of the point. You know, John Wayne's era, he dominated completely. There was other huge names, of course, but you think of Westerns, you think of John Wayne. Bowling about and kicking the fuck out of people and having his gut hanging out, but still pulling the fittest bird in the movie. The later era where it became spaghetti westerns and, you know, nowhere near as big an era, but produced my favourite films of all time. And the amount of influence those films later had. Wayne's era of westerns, the influence is so encoded into the fabric of filmmaking that it's more influential clearly, but probably harder to see. The spaghetti western influences are sort of garish and in your face and easier to recognize. And, you know, like the people that took those influences, like Tarantino, the most obvious examples, are very open about it as well. So it's easier to point out. So you couldn't say one's more influential than the other either. But Eastwood absolutely is the icon of that era. So I don't know. I mean, do you know what? I'd probably have to give it to John Wayne. Like, he's the Duke, mate. He's the fucking daddy. I don't know. I honestly, do you know what? It's a toss-up for me.
Draw?
Yeah, I'm a draw. You're Clint Eastwood, so we'll give it to Eastwood.
Wow! If I'd have known that, I'd have put that patch on 35 years earlier.
Steve McQueen, iconic actor, absolute fucking legend, king of cool. You know, who doesn't love the motorcycle jump over the barbed wire? He still gets caught by the Nazis, but fuck it, like, who cares? Like, he's an absolute gangster. But when you hear about him and his rivalry with Paul Newman, it kind of tarnishes it a bit because he did sound a bit insecure. Maybe not insecure, maybe it was just pure ego and wanting to be the best, wanting to be the coolest guy in the room that he always wanted to be, that Paul Newman said, you know, he always had to be the coolest guy in the room. And he thought about it, like he actively pursued that as a goal and he wanted to be the biggest star. You can only be so cool when you really, really want to be cool. Do you know what I mean? I'm not saying he wasn't cool. Obviously, he was a fucking G. He always kind of played himself, but he had so much charisma in it. Do you know what I mean? You can only be mysterious leather jacket guy in the corner if you're actually mysterious. You know, if you're naturally aloof, you're not trying to be aloof, and you just put on the leather jacket. You didn't go out and buy the leather jacket. It's something feels nearly a bit forced.
From a lot of people I've met in my life, the people who are cool are the people that don't try to be cool. They're just cool. Like, do you know what I mean? People do put on an act. You're saying basically your argument is he was acting like a dickhead?
Yeah. Well,
is your argument?
Well, like Tower and Inferno, I mean, I don't really have an argument. To be honest, I didn't even come into this thinking who wins.
Oh,
but
no, someone must win.
All right, fair enough. I actually like that element. Do you know what? One side of it I did like is I appreciate pettiness. One of the pettiest people I've ever met is my brother. I remember he was into MMA for a while, big time. There was this guy called Robin Black who was kind of a big commentator, and then he had a fall from grace. Not a commentator, sorry, a pundit on the sport. And he had like YouTube shows and stuff. And for a minute, my brother loved him. And he was like, no, this guy's great. He was telling me, he was sending me links like, watch this. Before I'd even watched any of the links, within a couple of weeks, he was like, this guy fucking. So he turned on him and he hated him. And apparently everyone hated him, and he had a fall from grace. When he had a new episode of his show out on YouTube, he would search it so that he could see the views were still going down. and he'd have that as like a little internal win.
Gotta implore that, actually.
Yeah, that's what I mean. When I saw that, I was like, that level of pettiness, I have to fucking clap. And it's the same thing with Steve McQueen when he starred with Paul Newman on the Tower Inferno. Like, he had them rewrite the script so that they had the exact same word count. So you end up with McQueen just having these sort of throwaway lines where you're a bit like,
Yeah.
Why is that in there? Like, he's just kind of like, oh, bad weather today. The coffee machine wasn't working earlier. Just fucking having this weird small talk and unnecessary throwaway lines thrown in it because they just were like, how the fuck are we going to pump this up? Like, we need to give this guy something to say. Because he was like, no, I need it. He was like, I need absolute top billing. Not just equal billing, but I need to be on all the posters. I want to be on the left-hand side, so they read my name first. And Newman eventually was like, okay, well, I'll be on the right, but I'll be slightly higher, which... don't know what that gives you, but I guess
so
yeah, so you gotta not only do you read it last, but then you gotta look up or you might even miss it.
Yeah.
And they were fighting over who gets the most heroic moment to end the film. Ridiculous like levels of pettiness. You gotta be like, fair play, but it's hilarious. But the whole thing coming through it, it's not like Newman was bending over and being a hippie about it. He wasn't like, hey man, no problem, no beef with me. But you do come away from it kind of looking like Newman seems like a cooler guy. Like, you definitely would want to hang out with Paul Newman more.
Yeah, but I gotta say, what you've told me, he sounds like a dickhead. But in this one, for me, there's one clear winner. Steve McQueen. I go to certain coffee shops, Declan, and I see photos of Steve McQueen smoking a cigarette, wearing a leather jacket. I see that black and white picture of him on the motorbike in The Great Escape. I've never seen one fucking poster of Paul Newman out there.
Yeah. He is iconic. He just looks like he'd slap you and take your bird.
Yeah,
he's an absolute G.
There's one winner here, Steve McQueen. Like,
fair enough.
Even the name, Steve McQueen for me.
Steve McQueen as well, he would fucking just constantly take jabs at Newman publicly. He'd be like, I do my own stunts, he doesn't, he's a fucking pussy. And then once Steve McQueen died, Paul Newman sort of paid him a tribute, but it kind of wasn't a tribute. But I mean, I guess if it was genuine sentiment behind it, he was like, you know, he was a son of a bitch, but he was a great one or something like that. But actually, do you know what? I take it back. Now that I play it through in my head, that is truth. Like, if he just said Steve McQueen was a great guy, that would be like what a modern Hollywood actor would do through their PR team.
Yeah.
And it would be horseshit.
Yeah.
But he was just honest. Basically, what we said, what we eventually came to the conclusion of, he sounds like a cunt, but what a fucking gangster. Like, I still really like him.
He sounds like a cunt, but what an iconic
What
cunt.
a cunt.
Yeah,
A
what an
top
iconic cunt, you know?